as far as like our actions from when we're live, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Hey, what's up? This is Randomly Intentional. I'm Timothy on Purpose.
I'm Raine.
We at it again.
Yep.
Um, I was what was I saying? How our actions when we are a certain when we are a certain age or we're in a specific like practice when it comes to behavior or action, for, like consistently what we're actually doing, whether it's with the paintbrush and it's our canvas of life, whether it's with our our I'll say muscle memory, but just with also like how we think about things, but like how it carves out and paves out um our or how it carves out or paves out like our path to wherever we're headed, you know, or like the fingerprints that we leave on what we touch, how it's really unique to just us, but it has a different it's defined differently than it was initially when you touch it than when you look back on it and realize like, dang, I did touch that. I didn't realize though that I left a mark and that mark would mean what it means today. You know what I'm saying? Like only the people I think like to you, so for like because we're talking about Tupac, so it's like for Tupac, a song like that, I'm listening to it when I'm 16, staring at my rear view, and I'm like, for some reason, it was a song out of all of the songs, I loved the Better Days albums, like the double disc, I loved the All Eyes on Me, I love Me Against the World, but that song from that soundtrack,
Yeah, I was gonna ask you too if you heard the Until the End of Time.
that was one of my favorite songs on Better Days,
What was?
Until the End of Time.
Yeah. No, I'm saying the album.
Yeah, the album Better Day. Oh,
Yeah.
the album. Wait, the album isn't the album is called
It's a
Better
double
Days.
disc Until the End of Time. No, I think maybe Better Days is on there. Let me see. I could be wrong about that. Yeah, no. Until the End of Time. The reason I brought it up is because that album is he went through these different Tupac went through these different phases of sounds like um what was the earlier one we were just talking about?
Me Against the World.
Me Against the World. That was like a kind of soulful, jazzy sound and a whole different demeanor and tone. And then All Eyes on Me is its own thing. But this Until the End of Time is a lot like that song that you just played, Staring in the Rear View. Like this song. No, wait. Not that one.
But that album, isn't that album called Better Days?
No. It's called Until the End of Time.
The name of the actual album is Until the End of Time?
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. I always thought the name of the album was Better Days.
Well, better. I don't know, but there's a song I'm thinking about.
You talking about the one that says "Take These Broken Wings"? Or you talking about the actual title song? If it is Until the End of Time, there's a title song, but there's a Better Days title song too. But I always thought that album was called Better Days.
No, there's a song. Maybe it's not on here. There was a song that I was thinking about that sounded like that one. Maybe it's on the other album. I don't know. I don't know.
Mhm.
Anyway, but what were we saying? I
I
cut you off.
ultimately was saying that going back to what we were talking about when it comes to him, I was saying that I think a lot of what, and I wasn't someone who obviously was next to Tupac in either one of his, you know, uh, life events that continue to just either kind of corrupt the seeds that were planted in him or just root him deeper in a vengeful ideation towards, America in the sense of like who was his enemy in America from his perspective of what he was communicating to the masses. But it's like when you look at what he was touching or putting his hands on when it comes to, you know, poetry or music in his earlier opportunities versus his last opportunities, it's like the essence of what he believed he was either raised to do or created to do seem to like not, for me, now that I'm older, seem to not change. It was just, and I think it's true for all of us. It was just like the life events that happened to him that began to corrupt his way of delivering it or communicating it or reaching who he wanted to reach. Because he grew up under that whole Panther momentum, I'm sure he always at some point wanted to impact and affect those that looked like him or those who were closely related to him melanin wise. However, and those who were oppressing one way or another.
Hmm.
But the more he began to become the, I'll say victimized, even though he probably would never say he was a victim. But when you look at Tupac's life, you know, when you get robbed or everything you hear in the music, it's from this not a victim mentality, but it's from the mentality of someone that things have happened to consistently. And now I'm responding in a way to where you're not going to take advantage of me no more. You know what I'm saying? And not only that, I am going to align myself in such a way to where I can leverage everything I possibly can to make sure I am never taken advantage of again. Whether it be a death row, which came knocking at his door, in a form of a record deal will get you out. At the same time, it's like real recognize real. You could see clearly now that I look back as a grown man and I listen to what's being communicated through the music. You could see the clear error in operating, outside of what was the normal track. I mean, what was like the normal track from him. You hear it in the way different people communicate from the different regions that he actually created relationships, especially like the Shock G's with the Digital Undergrounds. When you hear them speak in these interviews, him or others that were around that time, the individuals that he was closest to from New York, or like the Snoop Dogg's, or
I feel like whenever I hear those people speak about him, they just seem disappointed.
but that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm speaking from.
Hmm.
I'm speaking from, and obviously those are the sound bites.
Like that's the way I would summarize all those interviews. Because I've seen them too. But when I see
Right.
all
The
those
whole of the
interviews,
interviews
people that talk
or
about
the
him, that
sound bites.
all the whole interviews, like they admired him, but at the same time they're disappointed. It seems like they're disappointed because they knew that he could have been so much more than that. Not just sad that he's gone. That's obviously one element of it, but more so the attitude seems to be like that didn't need to happen like that, you know?
But that to me is like, I think even, grasping that, if that's what you grab out of it, it's like,
Right, it's just my assumption.
well, not even your assumption. It's like for the people that do feel disappointed, you know, I think the ones who feel disappointed, it's like, you have a right to feel disappointed. However, we can tell by listening to the man's music, for us who know who can feel,
Hmm.
and for us who can like tap in and sense based off of what has happened to us. You can hear you can hear the pain, you can sense the betrayal, you can understand to the degree that you're able to, that some of us get into a path. I did it, man, as a gang member. You get into this path and this mindset that you believe this is the only route to
Hmm.
communicate
Hmm.
what you want to communicate. And for him, it just happened to be, he was Pac, raised by Panthers, started in on the East Coast, and every pocket he ran into very real people who were connected to a real foundation of an upbringing. And it's just his final landing place was one that corrupted, like you were saying, the whole like real rooted gang banging energy
Right.
and camaraderie.
That was a distraction.
But it's so infectious,
It's infectious.
and it's so
That's the thing that people won't admit, right? That's the thing about gangbanging that people won't admit. Whenever you ask somebody, they always say they're doing it because they had no choice or blah, blah, blah. But nobody ever acknowledges that it's just exciting. Nobody ever acknowledges that they kind of just wanted to do it.
I wouldn't say nobody.
Most people don't.
I wouldn't even say most. Because you got to think
I
you're
mean, I've listened to a lot of people talk about, like, there's interviews that I watch too. There's this, I don't know, there's a couple YouTube channels that do this, but there's one that I really like, and he goes around, this Indian guy. I don't know if you've seen him.
I probably haven't.
He goes around to every neighborhood, like the like all the real, the roughest and toughest neighborhoods. Chicago, he did one the other day in Little Rock. I mean, he's going everywhere. The South, where they shoot a lot, Shreveport, Louisiana, like these places where it's just hood. They just shoot people dying every day. And I listen to these interviews. It's interesting to me. I like to hear what these guys are saying. And these are all current. These are happening right now. So this is young generation and hearing what they're talking about. And there's a lot of what you're talking about. There's a lot of what you would expect, where it's like they feel like they have no other option, or especially in those neighborhoods, in those areas, they're raised in it. It's all around them. They're not going seeking it out. It's there. These are the kids that are growing up around it from the time they're toddlers. Everybody they know, everybody in their neighborhood, their families, everybody's involved. And by the time they get to a certain age, somebody they know has died, which now sucks them in, right? But not everybody. Not everybody. And even if that happened to you, like, I don't know. I just know that there's that element. What you're saying is what I'm saying. This infectiousness, nobody I hear really identifies that as part of the reason why they're doing it.
Well, they are, because I think infectious, it being infectious and it being exciting to me, they're two different things. Infectious, I'm saying that it's like when a virus gets in you, and well,
It's a
you
thrill, is
know,
all I'm saying, really.
but not all the time. Well, let me before I don't want to misspeak on what I'm understanding infectious to mean. When I say it initially, I'm saying more so like it's like when someone
I'm not
laughs.
always speaking in dictionary definitions.
I
What I
know.
mean by it is that it gets inside of you, and then before you know, it's taken over you.
And that's what I mean. But that to some people it could mean excitingly though. Like you expressed, like
Yeah.
some people don't admit that they're excited by it. They're not just but I
Right.
mean in the
Right.
sense
That's
of
all I
what
mean.
trauma can do to you. Like what seeing someone else respond to someone else coming to potentially kill you. So if I'm with a friend and I'm not really wired like that, and I see that every time I go with this person, they're wired in this way that makes me feel like I ought to be wired like this, but I'm just not. And I have yet to have experienced anything that really starts to wire and rewire the way I think and the way I respond. I haven't I haven't been impacted so much so. The whole perspective of gang banging to the degree now at the point before I become infected by it is this is just what blacks do in my city, you know what I'm saying, in my neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? We wear blue. Which is what happened when the movie, like in our neighborhood, which is what happened when the movie South Central kind of, touched. It was just like, man, you see this young black boy whose father went through, he went through, he was stuck in this neighborhood and he was raised a certain way. Now he got to navigate this life amongst all of these older dudes without his dad. Some of them are taking advantage of him, some of them are trying to look out for him the whole while. But then these life events begin to happen and he's beginning to become impacted in a way to where it's like, as I'm watching the movie, I'm like, dang, this isn't my life and this isn't me. Even though my mom, You know, she's navigating this life of addiction. My uncle's navigating this life of addiction at this time. But when I'm stepping out, I know that this is the reality for some of my like my friends at the time. By the time I became fully like full-fledged, I still hadn't experienced this in my family, but walking and talking and like just doing life with individuals from my neighborhood that had already been in and out of certain situations, I'm starting to be around more, which is putting me in positions to be like witness to traumatic things, which now impacts me in a way to where I'm not going to say I'm like I become victimized, but the traumatic things that happen that now put me in a position to respond from starting to be impacted in a way to where now it's just my way of life, my way of thinking, and my way of being. I'm becoming infected by, or just, and I think there is some being enamored by the reality of like how it seems to be joy when all of these dudes come together.
Right.
It seems to be a sense of excitement
That's
because
what
the
I'm talking
buzz
about, that
and the
piece.
electricity, but it's like it's we are it is very it's
I'm not
very
saying that's the whole thing, but it's a piece of it. And for different people, it's a bigger or smaller piece of it.
right.
If you've had somebody close to you that died, that part might be a smaller piece of why you're doing it. You might be doing it for frustration, hurt, pain, revenge, anger, sense of responsibility to avenge your family member or friend's death or whatever. But if that's not part of your motivation, your bigger piece might just be like, I want to go hang out with these dudes. This is exciting. Oh, we're tough together and we go do this and that. Like I think that was Tupac's thing. I don't think Tupac didn't have somebody that died. Tupac was involved in all that stuff because it was around him and it was exciting, right? And he was like quasi trying to be a gangbanger too. Like he was wearing more red. He was mentioning MOB and slipping it into his rap lyrics and stuff. And that wasn't something he said before he started hanging out with Suge Knight. That's a crew that Suge Knight is from in Compton, right? That's what I've heard. That's like the gang that he's from is MOB. So he started saying all that. That wasn't something he just came up with. He was basically loosely attaching himself to that gang. And I know what that energy is. You know what I mean? That is like, oh, I want to be a part of that. That's exciting. That makes me feel tough or a part of something. So that was a distraction for him, I think. I
Yeah.
I feel like that whole thing, he saw that and he wanted that. I don't think he needed that because he already had money. He already had a voice. He was already able to say what he needed to say.
Yeah, I don't think.
It wasn't about his mission anymore. That was a distraction for himself. That was an insecurity thing or just fun or I don't know what it was. I mean, he was only 25 when he died.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think, I think a lot of those things that you just mentioned, I mean, I think it's easy to say that it could have been an insecurity. It could have been
We can only
something
assume
he
he's not
needed
here
or
to
he
speak
wanted.
for himself. Yeah.
But it's like when you listen to what you listen to of him and when you watch what you watch of him, he's not, he's not the average person that would need to want to need that. You know what I'm saying? Like, but I think it's easy because he's a human being, he's a black male, and he did ruffle as many feathers as he did. It's easy to put him in that box. We do it all day to day. Something goes left with LeBron James, he's easily put in a box. Something goes left with Diddy, he's easily put in a box. Something goes left with Mike Tyson, he's easily put in a box. And everything that could really, really be like all of the legitimate things, like
Yeah.
the things that could actually be really, really, really true are
Mm.
discounted because the narrative that really that the narrative that gives the individual the justification for real, it's not necessarily like respected. You know what I'm saying? Like you could never, you just got to listen to Pac. Like it's like when you listen to him in certain interviews or you listen to him in certain songs, he's telling you flat out every single time. Some of it may be very angrily, some of it may be very, calm, some of it, but it's like you can hear the same sentiment. There are moments where, he got the money on the set of like California Love and he
Right.
just, or you see these things and you just like, man, money got him. You see him with the Don moves. You see, man, the blood culture got him. You
Right.
know, you hear certain individuals talking, and it's like, but when you hear like Snoop tell of an opportunity where I think he was sharing with Angela, what's her name, the radio personality,
Angela Yee?
not Angela Yee, the other one, the one that has
Oh, MC,
Angie,
not MC Light. What
not
was the other one that does
Angie.
it?
I don't know why I can't think of this lady's name. She's
Anyway,
Puerto Rican.
yeah, I know what you're talking about. It is Angie.
Not Angela Yee though.
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
the other one. She's Ben had her own
yeah,
show.
yeah, 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 yeah. I know what you're talking about.
I think she's talking with Snoop. Anyway, Snoop's talking about this time where Pac is just expecting and anticipating probably like a war to some degree as a result of something that he put out there towards Nas.
Uh huh.
And when the two cultures collide, Nas, in a way that a lot of individuals who probably know of, I think the more deeper and the more like I think it would take a Nas type of mindset. When I think of Nas's music and I think of him as a person, how he's moved, it would take a Nas in Pac's life at this time to introduce Pac to not everybody is as reactive as you want them to be based off of what you're going through. Because he didn't meet him with that energy. He actually graced Pac out and was like, from what Snoop was saying, he actually graced Pac out and gave him a pass
Hmm.
in the degree of what you understand a pass to be. Because they were in New York. But Pac being in his energy and just being that confrontational, I'm just going to actually meet this
Hmm.
head on, did it in a reckless way,
Hmm.
which is where he was at, you know what I'm saying, at this time in his life.
Well, he was trying to learn how to. I think he was trying to learn how to be that.
Nah, I think he was all I think
Yeah, he was always that way.
in one way or another.
He was
And that's
always
what I
that
was
way.
talking about, the freedom of being who he was
Because
raised
even
to
before
be.
he got around them, he was already having confrontations like that.
But he was also very this is what I'm saying. Like, well, let me finish this. So
Okay.
Snoop, when it was kind of like, I think asked of Snoop, like, what do you think happened there? And then he because Pac was like, you see that? You know what I'm saying? Like I checked that nigga. Just excuse my language. I checked that, and then Snoop was like, um, nah man, like you just gotta pass. Cause Snoop comes from a life of seeing this on the regular, especially in Snoop's immediate environment
Hmm.
between the 20s and between, just where he's from in Long Beach, the gang he's from, and
Hmm.
then the gang that a lot of the other Crips within his area are from. You're likely to be able to identify what a past looks like when homies just is not about to smash you based off of who you are. And Nas gave him that respect. And Snoop had to call that out. And I think in that sense, with what you're saying about like the what he was receiving from being so confrontational and that energy that he had absorbed from probably seeing in the life that was taking place in California,
Hmm.
and he brought that energy in a different way. Whether Nas was more so like, man, I don't move like that, and so I'm not going to let this pull me out of my character. Or Nas just knew that he was in the place that he's always in. He knew he had who he had positioned where, which Snoop said he had it was his goons everywhere. Like there was a lose-lose situation. If Nas wanted to smash, it would have been a wrap. However, he didn't. And I say all this to say, like,
That also might have been him just knowing that, like, if I do something to this guy right now, I'm not going to be able to deal with the backlash of what's going to come back from me. It could have also been that because Pac had all that behind him. Suge, who
no,
everybody was scared to death of at the time.
no, and that's what
I
I
mean, I've heard that story too.
but this is what I mean though. It's like you can't when you are Nas and you come from Queens and you have the whole Queens, like I think it's easy to say if you are so prideful or you are so reckless that you would believe that, and Pac could have been that, because you remember Death Row was comprised of individuals that were. not always in agreement. There was Crips and Bloods from the
Mhm.
situation. There was a lot of bullying taking place within this situation. So it's like it's not even like it was a real stable situation when it comes to like reinforcement. You know what I'm saying? Like, but I believe,
Something had him feeling untouchable.
but that's just that. I don't even think it had to be that though. I don't even think it had to be Death Row. I just think Death Row was a platform for Pac to be able to do and express what Biggie was able to do through Bad Boy, or what Diddy was able to do through Bad Boy, or what through other individuals were able to do through these other major labels that would not touch Pac. They wouldn't mess with Pac. Like, he was blackballed to the degree that he was never going to be able to do. He probably wouldn't have been able to do music actively like that in New York, just based off of who had become his enemies and now who really didn't know how to mess with Pac like that. You know what I'm saying? Which is why when they came and put themselves in a position, uh, it's not that he didn't already have ties to the West Coast. It was just more in Northern California. What?
So here's what I hear all that. Here's what I think, right? And I think here's some important context that relates to all of us. So we got to remember that there's a clear pivot in his life, in his lifestyle, in his demeanor before prison and after prison, right? And that's also, you could say, before death row and after death row. Those are the same moment, right? Because when he came out of prison, that's when he stepped into death row. They got him out of prison, right? And so he walked straight from prison into death row. And I think that is another clue about his motivation or intention or his cause for taking that step is maybe there was this. I'm trying to put myself in his shoes and think what he might have been thinking. He's sitting there in prison. He's trying to figure out, what am I going to do when I get out of here? He could have been, which he's never said, but he could have been thinking, man, I hope people don't think, I'm a rapist. Like, I don't know if he was thinking about that. I'm just throwing that out there. But now he gets this offer from these guys that are out killing it right now. They got Snoop, they got Dre. It's the biggest thing out there.
But the rape allegations came after he was from Death Row.
That, hold on, that's the smallest thing. I'm just trying to get somewhere here. So, did it?
Yes, he was when
So why was he in prison?
he was in prison for. So you know, Pac was shot and arrested. You know, Pac was shot and arrested.
Okay. What?
When he got released from that situation, when Pac got released, while Pac was in there going through what he was going through, Pac's main battle in his mindset and why Suge came that way is because he was the victim of a shooting of individuals that were the closest to him, that were of Bad Boy. He figured.
Uh huh.
So that was his entrance into this situation.
Okay, but I'm just trying to say, how did he get into prison? What was he in prison
He got
for?
into prison with something that was more criminally related when it comes to like
He wasn't in prison for rape.
not at that time. He didn't go from the rape conviction into death row. That came after.
I don't remember it that way. You're sure about
I'm
that?
positive.
Okay, so you're saying he that I don't know about that. I don't know if I have to look that up, but that's brand new to me. You're telling me that he got convicted of rape. No, you're telling me he joined death row and then he got the rape conviction and went to prison?
I believe so.
I don't think so, bro. The whole story is that death row was like, sign with us and we'll get you out of prison
But for you gotta but for what though?
for rape.
Nah.
That's the only time he went to prison.
No, man, it's not the only time he went to prison. That's not the only time Pac went to jail.
Okay, look it up.
I'm much running. Go ahead though, what you were saying.
So regardless of any of that, the point is, and now I guess you got you got to tell me if my facts are straight here. But
or tell you if my facts are straight.
yeah, I think I'm right on this one. But my point is, so he comes out of prison, and now he's settling in with death row. I can't imagine he was doing a bunch of death row stuff before he went to prison. I mean, I completely don't remember that. But if he got out of prison and then he walked into death row, assuming that's the way it happened, then he would have been trying to, and this is the point I'm really trying to make, he would have been trying to adapt to that new environment, right? Like, so just let's assume for a second that I'm correct about about the order of these events. He's like sitting in prison going, okay, these guys are going to get me out and they're the biggest thing going right now. I kind of got to take that. Yeah, that sounds cool. Okay. Okay. And I can see how I can get in with these dudes and this is going to be big. They got Dre over there. His stuff's dope. All right. Let's go. And they're going to get me out of here. Okay. So they get him out of prison. Next thing you know, he's sitting in the studio and he's surrounded by people that he wasn't really surrounded by before. Now he's got a whole different energy around him and he's having to adapt because he's the only one that's not attached to a gang. Everybody else has their own people. Snoop's got his people, Corrupt, Daz, Nate Dogg. They all got their whole Long Beach crew. Warren G, everybody, they all got Long Beach and the Crips. Suge, DJ Quick, all of them bringing all the Compton and the Pyrus around. And then it's just Tupac. So he's kind of gotta figure out how to navigate that whole situation and survive. And there's almost no option but for him to start to align with some of that. And it would make sense that with Suge kind of taking him under his wing, that he would be more aligned with that, which is what seemed to happen. Suge's the boss, he's writing the checks. He's this big, overbearing figure. Everybody's afraid of him. He's got the cigar, and Pac is his right hand man, and they're running around together. And Pac's starting to feel like that's his big homie.
Okay, real quick. So this is why I was wrong, but this is why, in a sense, it says yes, Tupac was arrested and convicted shortly after being shot in New York, but the events are often confused. So here's a clear timeline. November 30th, 1994, shooting at Quad Studios. Tupac was shot 5 times during a robbery at Quad Recording Studios in Manhattan. He believed the shooting was a setup, possibly connected to people in the music industry. Notably, he later accused associates, Biggie and Diddy, though no hard evidence has supported this. Despite his injuries, Tupac was able to check himself out of the hospital the next day and showed up in court in a wheelchair. December 1st, so this was all happening at the same time.
Mm,
You know what I'm saying? December 1st, the sexual abuse conviction took place connected to an incident from November of 1993.
mm,
The charges stem from a woman who accused Pac of, we know
mm-hmm,
that story. Pac denied the charges, we know that story. February 1995, Tupac was sentenced. So this was all within the same while that was taking place, the shooting did happen. He
mm-hmm.
was incarcerated for whatever reason. He was he was released and ended up becoming convicted of the sexual situation and going in for the 1 to 4 years to which Death Row did give him the entrance by paying his bail and all of that
They
stuff.
got
So
him out. Yeah. And so this is again what I'm saying. I know you were looking that up, so I don't know how much you were listening to what I
I
was
was listening.
saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he's sitting there going, okay, they're gonna get me out of here. Maybe he was thinking about how am I gonna make sure my career keeps going, but he probably had so much energy coming while he was in there that maybe he wasn't worried about that because there was probably so many people just like when Tupac is on, when is it? Like everybody loved him already. So maybe he wasn't even thinking about that. But he's thinking, all right, these guys are going to get me out early and they're doing big stuff. They got Dre, they got the number one hits. It's the biggest thing moving in rap right now. It's some thug shit. Okay, I can do this. It's a little bit different than what I do, but I can get there, right? That's had to be what he was thinking. It's a little bit different energy than what I do, but there's some parallel. I can go in there and do my thing. Okay. And he's figuring out how can I make this work? He's devising it. So he gets out. Now again, he's sitting in the studio day one and he's got Crips over here, Bloods over there, Suge, Snoop, all these Crips from Long Beach, all these Pyrus, DJ Quicks, Red, Blue, and he's just sitting here by himself with none of that attachment. And he's got to be thinking, okay, like I said, he's got to be like, all right. At some point, by osmosis, he's going to end up aligned. And again, it makes sense that it would be with Suge. Suge is the boss. He's writing the checks. He's making the decisions. Of course, that's who he's going to want to be aligned with. And from Suge getting him out, and he's his new, prize fighter. He's going to probably keep him close. And they're riding. They're going to the clubs. They're doing all this stuff. And you see all the footage of them out at the clubs together. He was everywhere with them. They were, Batman and Robin. So it's gonna make sense that next thing you know, Tupac start talking about MOB and all this because he's around all this and he feels like he's a part of it and he kind of needs to align. But my point in that is the point I was trying to make. The point I was trying to make was that I agree with you. Even still, you still see that through line if you listen closely to his music. There's still that underlying tone of the same message he had from the beginning, which is trying to uplift people and uh, expressing his frustrations with the system that he feels like is constructed to keep black people down and the corruption in the government and the police and like it's all still there. It's all still there, but the earlier Tupac is activism. The later Tupac, you have to listen for it a little bit more because it's now covered in this hard candy shell of fame and being a player more. It was always there too, but now it's more about women and alcohol and weed and being tough and fighting and overbearing and the gangster attitude and like all of that is there. And that other piece, that more meaningful piece, becomes a bit smaller in that phase of his life and his career and his music. It becomes a smaller and less obvious piece. All I'm trying to say is this is my point. I just want to get this point off. Is that I've seen the same thing happen to I think the same thing happened to Nipsey Hussle. I think the same thing happened to you, where you can have this part of you that is so positive and good and and genuine, but then you can have this other part of you that's negative and corrupted. I'm just trying to find better words. This is not the right words, but those two things can't live in the same body. You know what I mean? Like you can't be 1 foot in and 1 foot out. I heard Tupac talking about uplifting the community and how things need to be better and could be better, but I also heard him talking about fighting, shooting, killing people for no damn reason, sex, drugs, rock and roll, it was all that too. And those two things don't go together. It's oil and water. And anytime you see somebody try to carry those two buckets at the same time, they end up tipping over. And that's what happened to him. And the same thing happened to Nipsey Hussle. He has those same conflicting ideas in his music and in his interviews, where you hear him talking about how to build businesses, uplift the community, do more for ourselves, blah, blah, blah. And then on the other hand, I'll shoot you and 6-0 and blah 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 and all this other stuff in the music. And that those two things can't go together.
But those two things are together.
No, no, no,
You
no.
know what I'm saying?
I vehemently oppose
You can't. How can you Vietnam? How can you? That's
because you
like
can't promote both of those things. You can't serve two masters. You
now.
can't
I'm not
promote both
saying
of those
what
things
I'm
at the
saying.
same
I'm
time.
not saying that it is. I'm not saying that it is.
You
That
can
is.
be those things, but
And
you
that's
can't
what I said.
no, no,
That's what
no.
I said.
Okay, okay. You can
That's what I said.
you can be
He
those things.
was those two things.
Okay,
You
but
know
you
what I'm
can't
saying?
promote them both.
You can't. You. This is the thing. This is the contradiction of America. Is that is exactly what. That's how we are raised. What movies do you go see? What movies do you want to see? Do you? What movies does your son want to watch with you? What movies does my son want to watch with me? Like, what video games does my son want to play? What video games that, like, everything that we've ever really kind of grown up enamored by or infected to the degree of always getting that feeling on the inside, right? And then who's benefiting from that? But then you have that very thing happening in real life neighborhoods. You know what I'm saying? Like with the Nipseys, who live the complete opposite of what he was actually beginning to understand and develop and build out. And now the war is within itself. So what I'm saying is like it might not sound or look like it is the not even like politically correct, but like the the thing to endorse or promote or get behind
Uh-huh.
because it is contradicting.
It's
It's
totally
true.
contradicting. And it never works out statistically. Look at everybody who does that. How does it work out? It doesn't work.
It never works out.
Right.
However, the purpose for it being whatever it was, it had like we're talking about him right now. You know what I'm saying? And he is gone. Unfortunately, Nipsey lost his life to someone who was within the very gang that he was at the time doing his best to raise himself out of the mindset of what he had
Sure.
always, pushed.
He was moving in that direction, just not fast enough.
But this is the thing about the hustles, the Tupac Shakurs, the the Marcus Garveys, the Martin Luther Kings, the Malcolm X's, the all of the individuals who we can dial back, and for the most part, the newer generations, we see all of the worst of everything,
Hmm.
and we wonder why it's still entertained by them. When you understand even your own story, most of us, if we're being honest, that war of fighting against the worst of us, only because therapy is available like it is, only because we are able to have conversations like this and it's platformed, do we really get an opportunity to be as introspective or like as insightful about where we were, where we're at, and where we want to go. Not to say that it wasn't happening before, but it was rare that it would be as televised as
Right.
these things are today. I'm just saying that coming from where a Nipsey has come from, or coming from where a Pac has come from, in the sense of understanding, like I am where I'm at. You know what I'm saying? And although it doesn't like I've played you a few songs to where the message to the average person, it's very contradicting, and your story is it's diminished
Discredited.
and discredited because they don't, not only do they not relate, but they can't possibly understand that the momentum behind what's taking place
Mhm.
started with a molestation, started with seeing your homie brains blown out. It doesn't justify it,
Right.
but it is very much.
That's all fine that you have a reason, but that
It's
doesn't
not
make it
even a
okay.
reason. It's not even a reason. It's a part of who you are.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
I think you're missing what I said.
No, I'm not missing. I'm not. So this is the thing. I'm not saying. So if you're expressing that, what I'm missing is
You're
that the
explaining
two
why
things
they
can't.
do it.
I'm
I
not
get why they
explaining. I'm
do it.
explaining who the person is.
I get
That's
that
what I'm
too, but
explaining.
I'm saying it doesn't work out. You can't do it. When I say you can't do it, I mean if you do that, it's not going to work because you can have all this positivity, but if you have this one spot of negativity, that's enough to drag you down and wash your whole thing. So you got to be all or nothing. That's what I'm saying.
Listen to what I'm saying though.
Okay.
You cannot tell the person whose life changed while listening to Nipsey Hussle that it didn't work. It didn't work for Nipsey Hussle's life because Nipsey died,
Right.
and Nipsey's son is without him.
Uh-huh.
Nipsey's wife is without
And
him.
whatever other stuff he was going to do is not happening.
It's happening. A lot of stuff is still
No,
happening.
whatever he was going to do has stopped when he died.
No, not
Yes,
everything.
bro. Whatever new stuff he was gonna do is not being done. He's still having impact, but he's not doing anymore because he's dead.
I understand that sense. The
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
that he was gonna do personally,
Personally,
but
the
but the
additional
things,
impact he could have
but
had.
this dude has a brother, an older brother,
Hmm.
who raised a lot of who he is in the sense of his mindset.
That doesn't replace him though.
It doesn't, but they were partners and they were developing together, and he
Yeah.
has continued a lot of the legacy.
Right, but that all of that is supplement. That's not him. He's gone.
Man, that's. I just don't agree. I mean, I agree to the
What?
degree.
You don't
Listen,
agree that he's gone? You
listen.
don't agree that
I
if he was
do.
still living for the last few years, he
I
would have done
do.
more stuff?
I do. I
Okay.
do. But you said that everything that he was going to do is not being done, is what you said.
I didn't say that. Well, okay, maybe I did, but it's a fact. That's not an opinion. Whatever he was going to do from the time he died till today, he has not done. He has impact from the
He
things
has
he did
obviously,
before that.
obviously he has not done because he's dead.
That's what I'm
But
saying.
some of the things that were set in play that he initiated that were to be carried out have been carried out.
Sure. I mean, that's goes without saying. Every single one of us have some level of impact, and when we die, we don't just stop having the impact that our lives had, but some people have more impact. His life had a lot of impact, but he wasn't a whatever plans he had that he was going to continue to do, they're not being done. Now, maybe his brother's trying to carry some of that stuff out, but his brother's not him. Maybe he had things on his heart that he was going to do that he never even told anybody. Those things are not going to happen now.
Yeah, that part is obvious. You know what I'm saying? I was kind of speaking to the legacy that he has left, and that the seeds that he have planted and the trees that are growing and the fruit that's being able to that people are continuing to be able to eat off of those trees are still nourishing people.
I think we're agreeing, but I just think we're saying it differently.
No, I think you're speaking from the perspective of in the sense of like you're speaking from the perspective of what doesn't work, and I'm speaking from the perspective of what has worked and what does work. And it compromises because we're looking at the result of a person's life who died as because of straddling the fence, how some people would look
Yeah.
at it, or on both walking in both courts at the same time. But it removes it, and it diminishes what. And once again, I'll go back to say,
Hmm.
when you go when you go and watch the movie that these actors play in, that are villains and heroes, or that are protagonists and antagonists, and you leave with a feeling about this movie or about this specific thing,
Right.
you typically don't leave the movie saying, damn, that was such a contradiction. You know what I'm saying? To the way that I live and to what I would actually even want my kids to live out. We don't do that. But in real life, with the people who walk amongst us and put their lives on the line for change, when they've actually rooted, now whether it was hecka wrong, you know, continuing to actually like exacerbate the reality of like killing and carrying pistols and promoting 60s and everything that anybody could take and say there was no way he should have been continuing to do this. You have interviews where he'll always say his 60s first. His 60s first. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't take that out of me. It's 60s first. But in so many ways, just like Pac, and in so many ways, just like other individuals who were so far gone, it's like they changed the track and tried their best to be who they could be for the hood. They tried to be the Robin Hood, and they died because of it. Pac's is little bit different. You know what I'm saying? However, confrontation is what led to death for both of them. You know what I'm saying? In a
Right.
way, the stories are different, but it's
They're
like
opposite.
they're they are. But the reality is like you were saying, in the sense of you're speaking one message but living another. And it's like, but neither one of them was trying to hide that fact. You know what I'm saying? They both were trying to live themselves and walk themselves and become who they desired to be, who you could hear in the music. You know what I'm saying? Like the propheticness of what they were actually laying out there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Was like,
The difference is I think Nipsey started from the dirt and was trying to clean himself off. He was trying to move in a more positive direction. It feels like Tupac went the other way.
yeah, but nah, because when you look at Nipsey's mom and dad, when you look at the reality of what he was raised in and what he was taught, he still chose. It happened that he was raised in the 60s, but just like Pac, they chose to align with who they felt the most purpose to align with, to make a difference at whatever. at whatever the reality may have been for them.
Yeah, but Nipsey, that happened at a natural age, like in a natural way where it makes sense. He was a kid, he was in the environment, and it happens. Like that's the way it happens. Tupac was an adult by the time he chose that.
By the time he chose what?
By the time he chose to align himself with gangs.
That's not true. He was raised. He
It
was,
is true.
bro. You know where gangs came from? Do you know the very party, the very listen, the very party, the Black Panther
It depends.
Party?
Okay, so it depends how we're
No,
defining gangs. I'm not talking about the Black Panther Party. I'm talking about the Bloods.
listen to what I'm telling you though. The
Okay.
Bloods and the Crips, the seed of that comes from the Black Panther Party. And
Sure.
what I'm telling you is that
That's not direct though. That's the
it
different
is
thing.
very, and that's what I'm saying, bro. I think that's where I think the misunderstanding is. It's like, yes, by the time Pac aligned with Suge and them, Bloods was something way different than when it was birthed out of the Panther Party, or the Crips was birthed out of the Panther Party.
Yeah.
All I'm telling you was that the fight, the struggle, the reality of death, the reality of oppression, and the reality of all of that was introduced to Pac way before what took place in his adulthood. It's just that now, and that's the difference between him and Nipsey. Now he's at an age to where not only can he look back and believe that he is one of the that he is royalty in the midst of that, because he comes from the original, the original, like, purposed, we are here for the community. Now in a very much like corrupted and very um like uh like negatively uh impacted organizational reality now, it doesn't remove the fact that through seed, genetically, and just through what he was raised in, Pac is so much more familiar with what he's experiencing than people, I think, give him credit for. Which is why when you think about all of those albums that came out
But the
after,
cause for his fight completely changed. That's what I'm saying.
nah, I think
You can't, how can you not acknowledge that something different changed? Okay, you tell me in your words then, because everything I'm trying to say about what changed for him, you're declining. I want to know
what
from
changed for
you
who?
what changed for Tupac then, because something
What changed
drastically
for
changed in his
Tupac is he
demeanor.
was betrayed, bro. His life was almost taken from him. He was ambushed and shot 5 times by people he would have never thought would have done it. That will change your whole. That's like that's like me coming with the homies, robbing you, taking all your studio equipment and shooting you 5 times in front of who was just shooting you 5 times. You survive. You think that, Timothy, it had to be your homies, bro. I was coming to a studio session with you, and then all of a sudden, you're telling me that your perspective and your way of life, especially if you're someone that was raised and was kind of on the track to kind of be your generation's savior, your own kind, to the degree that he thought they were his own kind. Shoot him and leave him for dead. They're upstairs. And mind you, this
And
is
that
all,
leads to him in Las Vegas fighting a bunch of Crips that have nothing to do with that. I get
bro.
what you're saying, but I think there was a perfect storm of that animosity and his environment changing to be all those gangbangers and him wanting to be a part of that. I think both of those things happened.
Yeah, but I think you have to have experienced a certain level of trauma to understand how the compounding factors, from especially in that sense of someone trying to take your life, the whole system, and even your own people, you seem to be coming against you, and then out of nowhere, it seems like there's this culture and a whole state, s- mind you, even though he already had ties in the North, the whole state embraces you in a way, because he was only 25.
Hmm.
So you think about between 15 and 25, that 10 years for us flew by fast.
Hmm.
But Pac, when I was 15, 16, he was 25, 26. You know what I'm saying? So I can't imagine what was going on 10 years before that, because up to that point,
We weren't really paying
I
attention.
wasn't paying
Yeah,
attention.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But I know that,
I remember the Tupacalypse Now stuff happening, but I was a kid, little kid, like I was barely paying paying attention to that.
but back to, I think, the original. you know, like course of conversation. It's like I believe life events like a shooting like that for Pac, the kind of mind that he had, how he was raised, who he was raised around, what he had already seen, all of those pillars in his community go through. You know, this wasn't Pac wasn't like a you or me. You know what I'm saying? Like he wasn't like a you or me. He was somebody. I'm not saying I'm not special. You're not special. You know, we're very much unique in our own right. But in the same way you're saying that him and Nipsey's introduction to that and choice of choosing it, Pac may not have chose it at 15, 16, 17, or 18, but it was chose for him. You know what I'm saying? In a different way that I think Nipsey chose what he chose. You know what I'm saying? Like him growing up in the 60s at that time, it was a, probably kill or be killed, especially in that region of South Central. It's like,
Right. Maybe I need to talk about it through the lens of something other than gangbanging for you to understand the point that I'm actually trying to make. Because this happens everywhere in life. Let's say you're married, but you also cheat a little bit on the side. At some point, that's going to catch up to you and ruin your marriage. Let's say you're sober, but you smoke a little crack from time to time. At some point, that crack's going to take over and you're going to be a crack addict again and you're going to go to prison or jail or whatever.
right.
So, what I'm trying to say
Let me say
is,
this. I stopped gangbanging.
I know, no,
I know what you're
no,
saying.
no,
I
no,
don't
no.
gangbang no more. I know it wouldn't have worked out for me. I know the truth of
You
two worlds
That's why I'm
can't.
a little surprised because you lived this already,
But I'm
and you went to prison, but you got lucky that you didn't die. They actually died. So my whole point is that trying to live this contradicting life does not work out for anybody.
but listen, all of us, we're saying this from the outside of watching these men transition through. See, this is the thing about what was going on with Pac
Do
before
you
Pac.
agree with what I'm saying or no?
I just told you, I stopped gangbanging.
I know,
I stopped
but you
gangbanging.
sound like you don't agree with me.
I don't
I don't
agree.
That's what I don't understand. What you don't agree with.
I don't agree with you saying that the two things can't be happening at the same
No, 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 no.
time.
You're misunderstanding me. I'm not saying that at all.
No,
I'm
let me
saying
finish my thought
I'm
though.
saying that they shouldn't. I'm not saying that they can't. They often do. And my point is that you should try to figure out how to get on one side or the other because you can't live both at the same time forever.
Right,
That's
but
all
see,
I'm saying.
and all I was saying was that you can't stop creating. You can't. I'll give you a great example, bro. When I stopped gangbanging, I had to force myself to stop writing because I did not know how to write
For sure.
from the perspective of not gangbanging.
Right.
So I started writing these alternative songs. I picked up a guitar because I couldn't write raps no more.
Right.
The same thing was coming out though.
Uh-huh.
Like the same need to communicate that I was this, I am this, and I want to be that. I witnessed this, I'm witnessing this, and I want to witness that. Was happening. It was just coming through a different sound and it was coming through a different instrument.
Hmm.
At some point I was able to write raps again. But if I'm being honest, the only way for me to get to a point of really understanding where I was at is if I could get out some of the mess that was still in me.
Hmm.
And so that meant that even though some of the brothers and sisters in Christ that were not necessarily able to palate certain cuss words or certain ideas coming from me because they hadn't necessarily like seen me in that light, me actually getting that out, and it was great. It was great in the sense of coming from me. It was music and it was creative, but not everybody could palate it because it's like, bro, that's contradicting. You can't do that. You're in Christ now. And it's just like, man, okay, I get it. From the perspective of someone that has never had to or be willing to navigate being vulnerable enough to show that I still got a little bit of dirt in me and I need to get it out. to now where I can write a song and actually communicate effectively without having to include any curse words in any of whatever was still resonating, you know what I'm saying, of the residue of that life. I'm just saying that I think the songs that we haven't heard from Pac and the songs that we haven't heard from Nipsey are the songs that would best communicate. Well, we heard a lot from Pac. When he passed, there were so many mixtapes. There were so many. That's where we get the Better Days, the Until the End of Times. You get these songs that would have never made they didn't make the All Eyes on Me album. They didn't make the Machiavelli album. You know what I'm saying? Like
Mhm.
it was what Death Row wanted to promote
Mhm.
that would heighten the West Coast's momentum
Mhm.
or put more momentum behind what the West Coast had going on. I don't disagree with you in the sense of saying that the two things will lead to very that will lead to an unfortunate end if you continue to live out both things.
Mhm.
But the reality for me, the reality is like, yeah, I had to face 5 life sentences before I could get it together. Between the first one and the fifth one, people are like, how, especially the ones that were gone for all 27 years and came home like, bro, we was thinking like, why do you keep coming back? We trying to come home. Why do you keep coming back fighting life sentences? Bro, stay out of trouble.
Mhm.
But it's like, who but you, while they're raising you up to be, or you're embracing this idea of whether it's gang banging, whether it's doing drugs, whether it's pimping, whether it's cheating on your significant other, whether it's whatever. Even you see some people in professional sports when they get out and try to navigate trying to do two different things, whether they want to go into being a sports analyst, but they just can't get out of their own head about trying to treat people like, or trying to treat the game like it is the same game as it was in the 90s. It's not. It's 2025.
Mhm.
It's a different game. It's moving at a different speed. It's not that it's soft and they got all these penalties now for this, that, and the third. It's just that it's a different game. But it's like you still have completely different, examples. I'm sorry, because nothing about that is violent. Nothing about that is adverse. But I guess what I'm saying is like, in order for a me to get to where I'm at today, sitting across from you, you know, in a podcast setting, having a conversation, living a positive life, I just happen to not die in my mess.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? So,
True.
but even while I was still in my mess, I was running across youngsters like, bro, you should reconsider.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Well, why are you doing it? Because I'm kind of stuck. How? I can't really explain it. Listen to the song. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, yes, it's a contradiction. You know what I'm saying? But the
For sure.
reality is this is who I am, and it is being what it is. You know what I'm saying? I just when you were saying that, you just like you were saying in the sense, this is what I thought I was hearing is like, man, I just don't get it in a sense like why individuals get to a point to where like they ultimately they die, live in the contradiction. Like, why didn't they just pull out? That's what it seemed like I was hearing in the sense of what you were saying.
So, and in fairness, I also did the same thing. I get that there has to be a transition. What I'm really trying to say is, I was trying to use their lives, your life, maybe even my life, as an example for anybody, ourselves and everybody else listening, to say, oh, if you try to do that, there's a pattern there. It doesn't work. And something bad, the bad ends up winning if you keep that incorporated in your life. The bad is going to end up having an outsized impact on your life. The point of that thought is I should make a decision sooner. I should notice, because sometimes we don't realize that we're straddling the fence. Sometimes we think we're moving at a good pace, but we're really not making that transition fast enough. Sometimes we have to be more decisive and say, I'm really ready to make a decision about this and go. Now, I would say, I would use this as an example. You've told me this story many times about how when you were in prison and you decided you were no longer going to be associated with the gang name and gang banging activity and all that, somebody said to you, okay, but if you're going to do that,
Don't straddle the fence.
Don't straddle the fence. And that forced you, because of the environment and the situation and your readiness to make a decision, it forced you even more so to be like, I'm going to be all in. I'm going to be all in this direction. And what I'm trying to say is, not life is not always going to present the environment and the opportunity to be conducive of such a definitive and decisive moment. We have to sometimes create that decisive moment for ourselves. And if we realize that our lives may be at stake, that everything good may be at stake while we're slowly making our transition on our sweet time, because that's what we're doing. We can always make a decision. We're not prohibited from making a decision. We can all make a decision. That is a choice. We choose if we're going to keep gang banging. Nobody's forcing you to do that. No matter what happened, if you decided you're going to stop, you would stop. It takes 1 second. So maybe if we realize what's at stake in our lives while we're slowly making our decision, my life might be at stake, my marriage might be at stake, my sobriety might be at stake, my whatever might be at stake. Maybe we can stop and say, you know what? I better stop straddling the fence today. I'm gonna go ahead and just make that decision, which you can, and there's no way you can talk me out of that. I know that you can make a decision because now we're in a position where we know that, and we don't give ourselves these days. Well, maybe I should just speak for myself. I don't give myself excuses. I don't give myself as much time um to make a decision. I know that the power that I have and the agency I have over my own body, my own mind, and my own decisions. I can choose what I want to choose. That doesn't mean I'm fully in control of life and everything that comes at me, but whatever is in my control, I try to be more conscious of that and be intentional about what I'm doing and what I'm choosing and not just be like, well, I guess today I'll just keep doing this. No, I can't operate that way because anytime I've operated that way, I've been flowing in the wind with wherever life takes me. And I realized that those bad decisions that I'm making, however small of a percentage of my life they might be, they might affect my whole life. That 10% that I'm living wrong might affect 100% of my life. So I can't afford that. So that's all I was saying. All I was saying is that I get that while, especially while you're in transition from point A to point B, at some point you're a little bit of both, maybe a lot of both. And I get why. I totally get why. But maybe if we look at everybody else's lives who's done that, and we have a few figures that we all know, that's why they're good reference points. Everybody knows Nipsey Hussle in their story. Everybody knows Tupac in their story. Nobody really knows our stories that way unless they know us. But those are good examples of what happens when you live that way.
Right. And at the same time, there is the reality of making one decision at a time. So it's like a transition is comprised of decisions. The one decision to say I stop. Then from that point, the fight now is against everything you've practiced for the last 17 years.
Hmm.
For some of us, the trauma bonds or the bonds to those to those the bonds to those things that because bro, it's like I see when I see people talk about when they first started watching porn and they want to make the decision to stop because it's ruining their marriage or it's ruining their idea of themselves. Or it was someone talking about it the other day. He was like, "Man, I started watching porn at or I started watching, I don't I don't know if I can say that word on YouTube. So um started watching, that type of uh stuff, what I'm saying, at 8 years old.
Hmm.
By the time he gets married though, he's never had intercourse with a woman still though. The first time he has intercourse is with his wife, like actual
Hmm.
actual intercourse with a woman. And they begin to get intimate. She's said to be a virgin too. And he did something that he had learned from watching porn, and she stopped the whole situation and was like, is where did you learn that from? Like, what is this? He didn't realize it, that it was as aggressive as it was to her, whatever the case was. And the interesting thing is, I had never heard a story like this, but it just
That's wild.
it made me think about how some of us, when we're navigating life and we've been practicing something, and we make the decision to step into, or I'll just say, we make a decision to like step out of this way of life and step into this way of life. The level of what you have to disassociate yourself from the inside out, it starts with the decision, but then it becomes more of what you have to begin to practice against what you've always practiced.
Mm-hmm.
Which in some cases, if you're not playing with a certain deck, or you're not playing with the right resources, you it could be harder.
It's hard.
And all I'm saying is, like, with the run that these individuals had, and with what it seems like they were pulling from, yeah, you have the interviews talking about the worst of them, but then you have the interviews talking about what was taking place in these individuals' lives and what was being said by these individuals in the more quieter conversations. But because media is what it is, and because we are who we are, which are people far removed from these individuals' personal lives, someone could talk the worst about me, and I know that you'll come to my. I know that there's so much that you could say to defend, because I didn't go pull nobody else, bro. Like, you were the only person at that time before I caught that case who I came to, sat on the stairs, and said, "Hey, bro, I don't know what's going on with me. I feel like I'm losing it though,
Hmm.
and I feel like something's about to happen, and I feel like I'm what actually happened." And I
Mm-hmm.
went away for years. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying? But if you were to hear someone say, which there are officers and there are people who were victims that don't believe I've changed. They believe what I'm doing all today is an act.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I I I don't think that you would stand by and let them say that and I'm not saying you're saying this about Pac or Nipsey. I'm saying, like, in the sense of, like, why I think I was so wanting to try to get out there, that although it might have seemed like these individuals died while straddling the fence, and that they could have made a decision to pull out, and it
Mm-hmm.
might have bought them more time,
Mm-hmm.
that they were in the middle of a process that only us as individuals can walk out as we begin to get more and more clarity and more vision, and make more and more decisions day at a time. You would be one of the only ones that could say, let me tell you something about a specific day in this. If I'd have died in prison, which, and there was a point where I almost did,
Mm-hmm.
and someone was to say, man, that's good, because that dude would have came home a monster.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me tell you, right before this dude got locked up, he was at odds with himself, so much so that he pulled me aside and was like, bro, I'm tired of being a monster. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
I don't know how to make I don't know how to make the clear decision. From the point that I said, hey, I'm not gonna gangbang no more in prison, the change for me actually to go out on the yard and tell everybody I'm done happened 2 years later.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point I stopped saying cuz. At some point I stopped hanging around certain individuals on the yard. And it just happened. It happened a decision and a day at a time. Nobody knows what that walk looked like though. Nobody knows the disassociations that took place within me to get to where I'm at sitting across from you right now. You know what I'm saying? And then that's all I was saying. Like, and I'm sorry if I probably came off like I was trying to defend their, you know, the contradiction. I think the humanity and who these individuals were, walking from I don't want to be to I want to be, I think gets misunderstood by a lot of people.
For
You know what I'm
sure.
saying?
For sure. And I'm not discrediting the good side of them or their journeys at all, right? Because I get it and I relate to it. What I'm really trying to say is I'm trying to see if we can move somewhere where we're not. I'm trying to see if we can evolve. Evolve, like, okay, it took however many hundreds of years for man to learn how to make fire. But because he learned how to make fire, the next generation knew how to make fire from day one. And so, what I'm trying to say is maybe it took all of them and all of us so many years to learn how to make fire, to learn that you need to be more decisive because these elements that you keep in your life can overshadow no matter how great the other parts are. It's not enough to be 70% fantastic and 30% trash or whatever. I'm just, whatever. You can't be 95% good and 5% bad or whatever. Like, you got to go all in. And maybe we can use all those examples and evolve as a human race to say, okay, I'm going to have to make decisions quicker and transition faster because once I realize that what I'm doing is not leading me down the right path, I have to start to understand what might really be at stake and that might come to fruition at any moment. Like, who knows? We'll never know. But I wonder if Nipsey Hussle knew that he was going to die on a certain date, what his last album would have sounded like. If before he started recording that album, if he knew that if you continue moving in this direction, you're going to die in 1 year on this date, I wonder what his actions would have been like and what his music would have sounded like. Same thing with Tupac. Same thing with you. I wonder if you knew, maybe nothing would have changed, but I wonder if you knew, hey, if you keep operating this way, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, you're going to go to prison. A friend you know is going to go to prison, and it's going to be a long time that you're going to be there, and it's going to be a big chunk of your life. I wonder if you would have been like, oh, that's actually going to happen. Okay. Or if you would have been like, well, it is what it is. Who knows? But what I'm saying is, I wonder if we can manufacture that consequence. And it's hard, and most people won't, but some people might. Somebody might. One person might say, you know what? You're right. This that I'm doing has the potential to lead there. And I'm not going to keep going and putting and living in that risk every day that might happen because it might actually come to pass. When actually I want to move in this direction, let me be more decisive and just go there now because I can choose it. That's the message, is that you can choose it. You can choose to go in the direction that you see is the best fit for you, the right direction. You can choose to go all in on that. If you're not all in on that, stop giving yourself excuses. It is a choice. I'm not saying it's easy. That's where people get that mixed up. When you say something is a choice and they start talking about how hard it is, I know it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. Disassociating with your friends or putting the drugs down or whatever it is, I'm not saying any of that is easy, but it is still a choice. That's all I'm saying, is that it's a choice. And if you don't choose faster, even if you're patting yourself on the back right now because you're like, man, I only smoked crack once this month. Good. It's better than 100, but it's not better than zero. And if it's one, it might as well be 100.
I don't agree with that. I can't agree with that,
I
man.
do, because I know that one turns into 100. And I know that if you're smoking crack one time, hold on, if you're smoking crack one time, what are all the activities that come along with that? You're still associating with people that smoke crack. So you could get caught up in a bad drug deal. You're still going to the neighborhoods where you go to buy the crack. You're still around those people. You still have a potential to overdose. All those risks still exist. Going to jail.
But I'm
All those risks still exist if you're doing it even one time.
right. But I'm just speaking more from. I agree with you that if this is where I do agree with you. If you're picking up if in that context, if you're picking up a pipe and you're smoking crack at all,
At all.
it's all bad. Period. If you used to smoke, if you used to hit the crack pipe 50 times a day, and you go down to one time a day, it's all bad.
It's all bad.
But I'm speaking more from the context when I say I disagree in the sense of
And
like,
hold on. On that note, I'm sorry.
mhm,
The problem with that is when we get down to smoking one time a month or whatever it is, we start patting ourselves on the back. We're doing a good job. And we trick ourselves into thinking problem is solved. Problem is not solved. The coast is not clear. That's what I'm trying to say is don't and I take my time. I get to yeah, eventually I'm gonna do no. You are still in. You are still in. Do not trick yourself into thinking that you have fixed it. You've improved. Good for you. But it ain't over, and all those risks are still there, just like when you were smoking 50 times. And if you keep going at one time, it eventually going to turn back into 5 and 10 and 50 and all that anyway. That's all I'm saying is that's all I'm trying to say. I'm sorry to interrupt
Yeah,
that, but that
but
that point I think is important that
I'm
what
saying that that's not an absolute that's not I don't believe that's an absolute truth for becoming sober, in the sense of gangbanging, in the sense of drugs, in the sense of smoking nicotine, in the sense of alcohol. Because there are, for whatever reason, it's just like heroin addicts. You know what I'm saying? Like, in order for them to kick, in some cases, they have to go and they have to get the other drug to kind of help them to get to a point, or it's possible. And I'm talking about
that's
degrees
not
here.
going and doing heroin one time though.
No, but what I'm telling you is that I'm speaking more because what they're actually getting, they're still getting high. They're just the doctor is getting them high to the degree off of a different drug that helps them to
And it's
bring them to a
debatable
point.
whether or not that's actually the right way to do it. But if you need a medical detox so that you don't die in the process, that's fine. But if you're just doing methadone every day now, you're still doing drugs.
And that's all I'm saying is that um I think for a lot of us, progress looks different. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I
and
get that
if
you don't want to discount people's progress, but what I'm afraid of is that you're giving people an excuse to continue doing what they're doing and saying, I'll get it done one day. Getting it done one day don't cut it.
Yeah, I understand that you could feel that way
That's what
because
I'm
you may
afraid
have.
of is you're enabling people to keep doing what they're doing by saying, yeah, you're
I just
making
know my path.
progress.
I just know my path. You know what I'm saying? I did survive. Unfortunately, it took what it took, and I wouldn't tell nobody to go fight 5 life sentences. I wouldn't say that.
Most people won't make it.
I wouldn't say keep game banging until you one day realize you survived, because a lot of us don't. All I'm saying is that I'd be, you know, I would be I think I would be being dishonest if if or I would just and I know some people would say, man, you know, some people can't afford for you to feel insensitive to them. You know what I'm saying? They need you to give them the hard truth. They need you to give them the absolute truth. And I believe if we were all the same, and if we all had the same level of whatever, then I probably would be in a position more up here to be like, I get it. And I know that there are some people that maybe like you, that's probably where we're different, is you probably do have more of a um like a zero tolerance type of approach, in the sense of like, nope, cut it all the way out right now. You have no choice.
Have no
Or
choice.
you could die tomorrow. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? But I just believe a lot of us are not, unfortunately, this is an unfortunate thing. A lot of us are not wired to receive that way. It doesn't mean that it's wrong, or doesn't mean that it's not helpful, because some of us, like in the situation I
When
was
you
with,
say not wired, what does that mean? Are you saying incapable?
no, I'm just saying, I think we're all capable.
So you're saying it's harder for some
I said,
people.
I'm just like I said, we're not wired, in the sense the wires. There have been things happen in your life that have malfunctioned you or imbalanced you to the degree that where you're not going to receive that like I would. Like, I couldn't. I had many people tell me, even when I was fighting against a life sentence, people were saying, "Bro, stop saying that you deserve life, that you deserve this because you don't know how to steward your freedom. Stop saying that."
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't be in a conversation with me at the table one day talking about how good God is, and then the next day say you deserve a life sentence because he's always been good, and you just, threw it in the toilet. You know what I'm saying? Like, either he's good or he's not. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Either he's going to deliver you, or you believe that he's not capable. And it's never that I never believed that he wasn't capable. I just did not believe that I was worthy and I was deserving, because I didn't know how to do what I was given an opportunity to do with, in the greater sense of my life. But there came a point where I was reintroduced to the idea of how he felt about what he knew about what I was capable of. And it was more so, I think, because of the grace he's had on my life, and because of how many opportunities I've had at it, um, is why my heart is kind of set towards people in their mess like that. You know what I'm saying? It's like raising a child. You know what I'm saying? It's like I know that they're not necessarily yet wired to understand that they are making the mistakes that they're making. However, to some degree, I can't expect like my 4 year old. Like there was a point where I'm like, why are you guys like you guys' room is always messy. Like why are you not? I showed you how to do this. You know what I'm saying? Like or talking back to their mom. Stop talking to her like that. Like why are you talking back? You know what I'm saying? And it's like,
Computers dying.
oh shoot, there's this expectation of wanting to like make them like hold them accountable for what they have yet learned to manage, you know what I'm saying, of their whole system. And I know these are kids, you know what I'm saying, and it's like, you can't necessarily, well, a lot of us don't really learn how to grow up until we're 20.
Yeah, but the difference is, I agree with that. And
Yeah.
I'm the same way too with my kids. You got to be understanding sometimes. The difference, though, and this is the stark difference, is when the stakes are your life. That's where you don't have the luxury to be like, oh, at some point I'll learn how to clean up my room. Okay, who cares if you never do?
Yeah.
But when it's, you might overdose or,
Oh shoot.
damn,
You can still talk, it'll hear you. You just can't hear yourself.
I can still hear myself.
Oh, okay.
I think it's your headphones unplugged.
Oh, it is.
Technical difficulties here on Randomly Intentional.
As long as the cameras are good.
uh, no, yeah, I think that's the difference though. Is if your life is at stake, you don't have the luxury of figuring it out one day because tomorrow's not promised. So if what you that's what I'm really trying to say. Again, I keep coming back to it. What I'm really trying to say is be conscious about what is at stake with the way that you're operating. If it's your marriage, if it's your job, if it's your finances, if it's your health, if it's uh your life, if it's the impact you're having on your kids, the world around you, be conscious of the potential finality of your decision being sooner than you expect
Mhm.
and being more significant than you may be consciously realizing. You may be operating in a way that in the peripheral, oh yeah, I could overdose on this, but you don't really think that's going to happen. You don't really think that. Or whatever. Yeah, I'm cheating on my wife. Yeah, I could get caught, but she's probably never going to catch me. Okay, but let's just imagine she does find out tomorrow because the truth always comes to the light. She is going to find out eventually. How is that going to impact her and your kids? How are they going to think about you? How's that going to make them feel? Like, imagine that coming to roost tomorrow, today. Imagine today's the day. You're going to be devastated, but you're operating in this false reality that it's not happening. Or, oh, I'm doing better. I'm doing a little bit better. I'm trying to stop cheating on my wife. Yeah. I only met up with that girl once this month. Bro, once with the text message, with somebody that might have said, like, life is weird, man. Life is weird. And if you are still dipping your toe in that water, you're gonna get wet.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree with that. It's like if you're continuing to practice the things or the thing, like if you're saying I'm not gonna cheat or I don't want to cheat no more, and you cheat, I think that's a different type of straddling the fence than if you're caught up in a world of gang banging and there's so many things that make up your identity, and you're saying, all right, I'm gonna stop carrying pistols today because I'm not killing nobody.
Hmm.
All right, today I'm gonna stop hanging with the homies at the park because I'm not calling shots on nothing. And if I'm there, they're gonna be dependent on me. All right, I'm not saying cuz no more or blood no more. You know what I'm saying? Like that's not coming out of my mouth. These things for a lot of us happen one decision at a time.
Right.
And it doesn't change the fact, like, especially when you're in prison. Like I remember I had 9 dudes who I had been around with for 3 years write letters to communicate to the goon squad or to the authority that I was someone who should be considered being removed from who they identified as a gang member. You know what I'm saying? Like someone that was a member and operating as a gang. Like not leader in a sense, but some for some reason they just had me as every time I went to committee, it was like this thing. And I'm like, man, I've already like on the record told you every committee for the last 4 years. That's not my angle. And I don't push like that. And that's not, you don't see me for 4 years going to any of these meetings, being aligned with anybody but individuals that align with the body of Christ. But, and this can be discouraging, but they were like, you know, yeah, this is all compelling, you know, in the sense of the truest definition. Like they were like, we actually are amazed when you, now that we're having this conversation, you're someone that we actually have had conversations about. It's it's amazing that you haven't had one violent situation or one write up since you've been here. It happens a lot. There's a lot of people here that don't, but with your C file and what you've had in your past, where you
They
know,
expected something different from you.
and it fits the bill, and it when you have an identity wrapped in something, and you've always believed that that's who you, not always, but you, for a degree, a period of time, you believe you are this, and you do that. When someone else kind of reminds you, like, oh no, you're behaving and you are operating as a model inmate and you are exhibiting great behavior, but you are still a such and such, such and such.
Mm-hmm.
And your name still is this and that. And it's just like, man, some people don't even realize how much of a setback that can lead
Mm-hmm.
into. It's different.
It's
But
not easy.
that's why I was saying, like, you know, level wise and dimension wise, if it's just alcoholism,
Right.
I understand. If it's just not just heroin, or if it's just ecstasy pills, or if it's just smoking cigarettes, or if it's just smoking weed, but I things that have to do with identity, like with what Pac and what Nipsey were going through, I believe it's so much harder to pull from.
Well, you can't minimize those other things.
Okay.
Somebody might be drinking alcohol because they're covering up trauma in their past and they have social anxiety and they can't even be around people unless they have a drink. So for them to stop drinking makes them vulnerable and exposes all those things that they've been trying to cover up, and now they have to do all the self-analysis, and everywhere they go there's a liquor store here, all their friends are all drinking buddies, so they have to disassociate with all their friends, just like if you try to disassociate with your gang friends. It can be exactly the same for any of those things that you just mentioned, that they might have to go through all of that, and their identity might be the drunk guy that's always hanging out buying shots, and now I'm not friends, I can't hang out with you guys anymore because all we do is drink together. It could be very similar.
But I think the difference is in those senses where substances are involved,
Yeah.
all you have to do is all you have to do initially is stop using the substance. You just stop putting stuff in your
And
body.
stop hanging out with all your friends.
But what I'm saying is that you can stop hanging out with all your friends and still use the substance at home by yourself.
Right, but I'm just saying it takes all of that.
No, I think.
Yeah, I've done it. It does.
But you still did you still use the substance at home
Um
or by yourself? I'm saying.
no, I mean no, once I stopped, I stopped.
But you, so you're saying in order for you to stop drinking, you had to stop hanging out with
I
people.
had to do it all. Yeah. I stopped drinking and at the same exact time I stopped going out and hanging out with people.
But I don't. The goal wasn't to stop hanging out with people. The goal
No,
was
I
to
had
stop
to.
drinking. But I'm
Yeah.
saying the goal though was to stop drinking.
And the only way I could was to stop hanging out with people. And it was hard. And it's still hard. I still don't go out and hang out with people because drinking is always a part of it. I can't go stand at a bar. There's a lot of friends that I never hung out with again. Ever. That I actually cared about. But alcohol was too big of a part of our relationship. You know what I mean? And I had to just cut them off. The same thing happened on Alistar when I decided I was going to go in a different direction. That was also an identity crisis for me, similar to what you're talking about, where I saw myself as one thing and now I'm not. And I look at my phone. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go in a different direction. I look through my phone trying to figure out how I can move in that other direction. Somebody can help me get a job. Somebody has a business I can work. There was nothing. I had to cut off my entire community. And to this day, there's tons of people that I used to see and hang out with all the time that I've never hung out with again since that moment where I made that decision that I'm going in a different direction. And there's a lot of walks of life where you build up an identity and a community around it, whether it's substance abuse or it's violence or
But
it's
you,
crime.
but you would say it was your identity though. Like
Absolutely.
you were walking around claiming alcoholism as your identity.
Oh, no, 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 no. I was talking about other stuff that I've done in my past. But alcohol was subconsciously a part of my uh, physical makeup and part of how I operated,
Yeah.
right? Because I drank so much that it became a part of my personality, not necessarily a title that I claimed, like I'm a drinker. No, it wasn't that. It was more so that like I drank, it put me in a mind frame, and that's who I saw myself as. And if you drink so much or you do drugs so much, you start to adapt to like that mentality as being who you are. That becomes your normal. And when you're not drinking, it becomes some weird thing. It flips. Whereas normal, most people, you don't drink all the time. Every once in a while you drink, and now this like this different personality shows up for a second, and then it goes away. When you're drinking all the time or you're doing drugs all the time, you're always that. And then when you're sober, you're like, oh, what is this thing? It's weird. You know what I mean? But it becomes your personality because it becomes your standard mode of operation. It's the way you always feel. It's the way you always think. It's the way you always talk. It's the way you always act. It's the people you hang out with. It becomes you. And same thing with even like cheating, right? You can say, oh, you just stop cheating on her. Well, you might be in love with this other woman, and now you have to, or man, and now you have to disassociate with them. You have to resist the temptation to reach out to them. You have to try to rekindle your relationship. And maybe there was a reason we were stepping out in the first place. Maybe there's something about your main relationship, your marriage, or whatever it is that you weren't happy with or weren't fulfilled by. And now you have to go face that again because now that you don't have this release over here, maybe you were getting a certain kind of love or a kind of sexual activity or something over here that you were missing in your relationship. Now you don't have that again, and you have to deal with that void that existed from the beginning. So it's not always as simple as just flip the switch. You're thinking about your own
Nah,
your own
I'm
walk of
thinking.
life, which is
No, I'm thinking along the lines of like you can't. So I'm thinking like this,
uh
and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like I can be a Crip. I could be a Crip gang member and drink, cheat, smoke weed, do crystal, and all of that.
mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like I can, I can,
You're
but
in bad shape.
right. Well, I guess what I'm saying is that if I stop doing all of those things, I'm still a Crip. If that's my identity, it's like being an artist.
It
So,
depends on what you identify with.
and that's what I'm speaking from. I'm speaking from the perspective if I identify as someone that's been pursuing football since I was in junior Pop Warner
Mm-hmm.
and I made it to the NFL and it's time to retire.
Mm-hmm.
But all this time I have had I have had a weed habit
Uh-huh.
and I have had an alcoholism habit.
Uh-huh.
If I retire the NFL, in my mindset, alcoholism and drug addiction most likely contributed to the identity that's wrapped in football or sports. But if you remove those things, at heart, I am still an athlete and my identity is wrapped up in that. Is all I'm saying. So it's like being black. You know what I'm saying? Like some people identify as Crip just like as they identify as their race. Versus I think alcoholism or those things that we put in our bodies, those things that get us even more locked in and rooted into our identities in a toxic way or help us to navigate our identities it's a different thing, you know what I'm saying? But I get and I believe that these two things can be true, you know what I'm saying? Like people can get initiated into a gang intoxicated, and so then now they can't even operate within that identity unless they're drinking, you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like, but I guess I was just
Any
saying,
of those things can be an identity, but they're all a mask. Some of them might be bigger, deeper mass or harder mass to take off, but they're all something that we're not. None of us are naturally born as any of that.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying, the presentation of alcohol, drugs,
Hmm.
uh, 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 sexual compulsion, like all of these things are presented different than the choice to get into a gang, get into a gang or a profession or a like a career choice,
Hmm.
like a police officer versus a firefighter. Everybody would identify them as the same. Like these are
Right.
community rooted organizations that are here to create safety, and they're agents, you know what I'm saying, to help us live in a safer neighborhood.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. You're saying like whatever you. I get what you mean, that you kind of own the identity of what your main activity is. And
Or
people's main activity isn't necessarily drugs and alcohol, but for some people it is.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so if that's your main thing is being a meth head, there are some people that that's their whole life. They go from selling it to smoking it to making it to buying it to doing it to hanging out with other people doing it. Like some people that's their whole life is just doing meth all day or doing heroin all day. And for them, that's what they are. They are a
that's who
meth
they are.
head. And they would tell you that. That's who I am.
Yeah,
I'm a meth addict. I am a drug addict. Some people identify as an addict.
yeah.
And if that's who you are,
It's
then
hard to convince you otherwise.
well, what I'm saying is they would have the same struggle as anybody else who has taken on an
Yeah,
identity
right.
to disconnect from that identity, and that's not easy
I remember the first time
because
somebody,
it forces you to say, then who am I?
right.
And the person you are or were before all of that, there probably was some damage there that you were trying to get away from, and now you have to go back and look at that again. Also, having forgotten about it for so long or buried it so deeply, now you got to not only live it again, but you got to dig it up and look at it. It's just not easy.
Mm-mm.
None of that is easy, but it's also not impossible. And that's where you kind of correctly labeled me as being somebody who's like, no, you just got to do it because there's no choice. It's not easy. So you either got to do it or you got to, or not do it. You know what I mean? Because if
Well,
you say it's hard, then you're never going to do it
I
because
guess
it's
all I'm
hard.
saying is that I believe Nipsey Hussle and I believe Tupac were doing it. I just believe it wasn't happening on everybody else's timeline,
It
and it
wasn't
became
happening
a
on
problem.
their timeline because they're
It was.
dead.
It well, they you expressed it earlier. You said that I wonder if they knew they were gonna die. If there was anybody that knew they were gonna die, it was Tupac.
Oh, for sure he did.
But what I'm saying is some
But
of this
was
not
he
only
saying it or did he really know? Like,
listen,
and
man.
again, we'll never know. We could debate this to
No,
the end, but like, if he knew he was gonna die that day, do you think he would have moved differently at all?
no, man. I don't. I think this is the thing. I
I
think,
mean, it's an assumption.
of course.
We don't know
So
that.
no, and what you're asking me,
What
what
do
I
you think?
believe,
Yes, yes.
and I'm saying that when you, as a gang member or as an addict who does things that they know could potentially lead to death, especially the addicts who have overdosed. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? It's like they know that once they put that in their vein, the possibility of overdosing happens. It's just that
For
we,
sure.
in some narratives, we tell ourselves it might not happen right now.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I think with gangbanging, there's a lot of times where I left out of the house, and the reason why I grabbed a gun is because I said I might or I could die today. I didn't say I will die today. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I didn't know. But I think people like Pac who may have had dreams of death, I've had dreams where I got shot multiple times and
Yeah.
I walked out of the house
Yeah.
making sure that I didn't have my gun off safety.
Here's another thing that you made me think about, right? Is like, okay, so a drug addict, they might put that in their vein and they might know that it's possible. I watch a lot of intervention too, right? And so you reminded me of something, and I realized that that can be associated not just with drug addicts, but with gangbangers and with everybody else. Sometimes you're right. They are aware, we are conscious that um that that ultimate consequence may be near. It may be closing in on us, but we've become so hopeless and so we've lost so much hope. Hope is always the thing. You and I have talked about hope so much, and hope is the reason why you and I are still here today because we never lost hope, and God granted us enough time for us to latch onto that hope. But when you are hopeless, you don't even really care if you're going to die.
I don't think you have to be hopeless to care. I think you just have to be you have to be aware. Like I don't think Pac was
I don't think Pac. I'm not talking about Tupac.
right.
I'm just saying that people. I'm not talking about Tupac or Nipsey Hussle. I'm saying that, but you never know though. Like with Tupac constantly saying "I'm gonna die" and then still barreling towards it, he might have just accepted that as his fate,
Well, I
as
mean
his fate.
Martin Luther King, the Malcolm X's, they were getting death threats and letters. Like, people were tipping them saying you like Malcolm. It said that Martin knew he was probably going to die that day,
But
which
that
is
was
why
like
his
that's like martyr activity though.
they
He was
don't.
like, okay, that
And
I'm
yeah,
dying for the right cause.
and I believe that Pac and I believe that Nipsey carried a bit of that in their spirit, in the sense that they believed that if anything, they would be martyred.
But they
Especially
didn't die for their cause.
they died for their
No,
cause.
they didn't, bro. They died for gangbanging. Their cause was bigger than that.
I don't. So so what do you believe? What do you believe Pac believed his cause was?
To organize black people and to uplift them, to have to evade the oppression that he perceived as being out there in the world, oppressing the black community from drugs, from being financially prosperous, from being miseducated. I think that's what he thought he was trying to do, was educate. A very similar goal, I think, that Nipsey Hussle had. I think their goals were similar.
And you don't believe that they did that?
I'm not saying they didn't accomplish it, but I'm saying the actual cause of their death in that moment didn't have it. That moment only had nothing to do with their bigger cause. It was they died from their distractions, which has been my whole point this whole time, is that they're 90% good. They died from their
But
10%
help
distraction.
me understand, like, how so then how did Malcolm X and Martin Luther King's assassinations or murders?
Because they died in the course of trying to do good. They died in the course of continuing on their mission of the good. This is the good I'm trying to do in the world. And if I die along this path, then so be it. Right? If I get assassinated while I'm out here trying to give speeches and prophesize to the world and promote good, then so be it. But you're not going to stop me from saying the things that I need to say. That's different than Nipsey having this interaction with this dude that shouldn't have even been around him and getting shot. I'm not blaming Nipsey, but he was in an environment and conducting himself a certain way that allowed that energy to even be around him.
So you're saying
And Tupac was in the middle of a casino, everybody knows, fighting with some Crips, and then who knows what really happened, but
so yeah, in that context, yeah, they weren't martyred, but I'm saying, are you
right.
saying that but you're not saying that the way that they were killed diminishes their like
No,
them.
I'm not saying anything is diminished about the good that they did. What I'm saying is the incident that caused their death was when they were not in line with their bigger mission. Tupac was not in line with his bigger mission fighting this dude in this
Yeah, I
hotel.
agree. I got what you're saying.
And neither was Nipsey Hussle standing out there with this dude. Now his might have been a little bit more
His
vague.
was
I don't really
yeah.
know what was said and all that, so I don't. I'm a little bit reluctant on that one. But still, my point is, if you listen to his music, he was still screaming the hood and talking about ignorant gangbang shit, just like if somebody was fully active gangbanging. It was both was there. Both are there.
Yeah.
You can find both in that music. You know what I mean? So, and I'm not trying to talk bad about them.
Yeah.
There are great people that inspire me that I listen to every single day. So yes, I 100%. I came in this morning. The first thing I said when I walked through the door, "Hey, do you still listen to Tupac?" I've been listening to Tupac. I'm on because I'm on a kick right now. I've been listening to that same stuff that you talk about, like that era, like "Never Had a Friend Like Me" and all this. I'm listening to that. And "Who Do You Believe In?" And I'm listening to that as I'm riding my bike, as I'm walking, I'm working out, I'm whatever. I'm listening to that a lot right now. And I'm just like, man, that dude was so deep, bro. So deep. I don't care what anybody says. And it's funny because these days you have a lot of people in the younger generation that weren't exposed to Tupac in his essence, in the element. And they're now starting to point back because they don't realize his power and say, "Oh, look at this video of him when he was young and he was at the performing arts school. He was gay. Oh, look at Tupac. He was an actor. Oh, he was just a really good actor. All that was fake." They don't know. They have no idea. And I'm reconnecting with the music lately and I'm listening to it and I'm relating to it and it's still timeless. And then I go, oh, and this dude was only 25 when he made this song, probably 22, 23. What? What? One of the deepest souls on the planet. And doing all that, connecting with the spirit and all of that in the midst of having all the distraction and noise and people and things and business around him and all that. And he was still able to channel these thoughts in such a way. He was so powerful. And I'm not saying I wish he would have made different decisions and lasted longer, because what happened with him was God's plan. It happened the way it was supposed to happen. Same thing with Nipsey, right? But if we have the ability to affect our lives and our paths, if we have any conscious decisions that we can make, we should try to look at what those brothers did and what happened in their lives and maybe learn from it, like we learn how to make fire faster after the first person figured it out. Let's bring more meaning to their lives by saying, look what happens when you're that great, but when you allow this bit of negativity to exist in your life. Look what happens when you entertain just the smallest speck of ignorance in your life while you're pursuing something so great, even though you're 95% this and one of the most powerful people who ever lived. If you entertain just the smallest speck of this, that's enough to bring you down. What am I doing in my own life today where I'm patting myself on the back because of my 95% greatness? I'm dancing in the end zone, right? I'm celebrating in the end zone, but I don't realize the game is still going. Where am I still allowing, and recognize that it is a choice? Where am I still allowing 5%, 10%, 50% of negativity in my life? And am I not being fully conscious of the fact that that's enough to take me out? And if I stop for 1 second, probably most people know, because while you're trying to go through the transition, you don't really see it a lot of times. But if we can push somebody a little bit to make that decision a little bit faster, like, what is the potential consequences of that thing that you're allowing to exist in your life? And do you want to see that happen? Because it can happen today. Stop pretending or stop living in uh, a false reality and a false sense of security that this thing that's potential is never going to happen. Because what if it does? Is it worth it? If it's not, then recognize that what you're doing is a choice, and you better choose a little bit faster, because every day that you still allow that to exist is another day that you might have to face the full breadth of consequences from it, not 10% consequence. That 10% that you're allowing to exist can affect 100% of your life. 100% of your life, whether it's your marriage or your health or your life or your freedom, whatever you are slightly involved in, that is enough. Even if you've made improvements, good for you. Good for you that you've made improvements. You went from 100 times smoking crack in a week to once. Fantastic. Make it 0 now, because one can still expose you to a lot of the same consequences as 100. One can still expose you to a lot of the same, not maybe not all, but a lot of the same consequences as 100. You can still die. You can still go to jail. You can still, whatever. Who knows? Your kids can still find it. Your kids can still see you doing it and start doing it too. And now the whole next generation is doing it. A baby can find your sack somewhere that you thought it was hidden and they got it, or you fell asleep and they got a hold of it and died, got it in overdose. Anything can still happen if you allow that even speck of that to exist in your life. You lose your job, you lose the whatever. I just don't want people to be, if you still understand that consciously and you take your time, that's on you. But I just know that from my own experience and from your experience that I've seen vicariously, we sometimes don't really fully realize what's at stake. And I just want people to know what's at stake. I just want them to know. If you choose it, that's fine. But another thing that's a phenomenon about life is when you don't know, when you're ignorant, sometimes you somehow escape these consequences. But when you know that what you're doing is wrong, like if I was to step out today and go do some things that I did 30 years ago, 25 years ago, I don't think it'll work out very well for me because I know better. So I just feel like just the way the world works and life works, that I would face the consequences of, it's almost like what's it called when you get a deferred sentence? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean that's what it's called.
Is it just a deferred sentence? I
Yeah,
thought there
it
was
is.
another term
Well,
for it.
no, you just you they let you go, and if you mess up again,
Then you're doing that time plus
yeah,
that time.
yeah.
I feel like that's what I'm on. I feel like I'm on a deferred sentence where if I go mess up again, I'm gonna deal with all of that. My whole past, my whole life is gonna come back, and I'm gonna have to face all of that. And so I'm trying to kind of create a moment like that for somebody where it's like, look, man, be aware of what you're dealing with, and I don't want anything bad to happen to anybody. Obviously, my whole point is like, look, man, just be aware that you're choosing to expose yourself to certain risks. Don't be oblivious. Don't be oblivious that those risks exist. And just because you're doing better doesn't mean the problem is fixed.
Mhm.
Doing better and problem solved are two very, very different things. Very different. I think that's my whole point. I think that's all I was really trying to say is that improving is great, but it is not the same as problem solved.
Yeah, but improvement leads to that.
Right. But how long?
I don't know.
If I'm taking 20 years to quit smoking crack, is that fast enough?
No, but that's extreme. And for the people that
It's
are
an extreme
trying,
example just to make a
yeah,
point.
people trying to quit smoking for 20 years, you know, I can probably lean more on the side of saying that you're probably not really
You're
trying.
not really trying.
You know what I'm saying? But people who go through people who go through like those incremental, changes where the winds, like you can see what they left off by the wayside and they didn't pick back up,
Mm-hmm.
but then now they got to battle with this because, like I said, it's layers.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the people
Takes
who
time.
I empathize with more. You know what I'm saying?
And I may not sound like I do, but I empathize 100%. I know it's not easy. I know it's not easy, but think about what's at stake. What's really hard is dying. What's really hard is life in prison. What's really hard is losing your family and your marriage. What's really hard is, like that's really hard. That's harder than all that.
But I think for a lot of us who really forfeited the fear of dying, because I think that that's unhealthy. Like that, I mean, you shouldn't. I'm not gonna say you shouldn't fear dying because it's something that we all. It's gonna, but like dying too soon. You know what I'm saying? Like I got 4 kids. There was a point where I didn't care if I died.
Right?
And that just came with living a certain life
Right.
because you knew if I was fearful of dying every day, it was just
Couldn't survive.
energy. It was hard.
Yeah.
But now that I got kiddos, it's like, man, and a wife I've not been able to travel with, or even now, like her, like our reality, she was telling me last night, she was just like, man, you know, it's, it was like an hour of her just like having to battle with the reality of like, I don't want to die. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is tough.
Hmm.
Like why and how?
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, man, you know what I'm saying? How, and not even really however. And at the same time, I'm like, man, this is like the concern for dying. It can be unhealthy if you allow it to treat you in an unhealthy way, but it could be healthy
Like if the fear consumes you.
if it consumes you and you begin to go in the direction of now eating to kind of try to not feel, or drinking to not feel, or sexing to not feel,
Right, because
or
living in that fear every day that way is unbearable.
it's unbearable. You know what I'm saying? However, though, if you can take that for an hour and say, I'm not going to entertain it to where it consumes me, but I'm going to like think about the things that I actually would want to understand more deeply, why I didn't get to accomplish them before I died. If I was on my deathbed in 6 months, in a year, in 3 years, it's like,
Mm.
what can the reality of death being so close, like you were saying, make me pursue and make me stop pursuing? You know what I'm saying? And it's like I'm
Mhm.
face to face with that with my wife. It's like
Right.
it's not often, believe me, like she
She's optimistic.
I'm learning so much about her. You know what I'm
Right. I
saying?
bet.
In this time. I'm learning so much about myself. If anything, I'm probably the one who has been more so trying to avoid distracting myself from the reality of, our circumstances.
Because you've learned that facing things, even though it's hard, is the better
It's the
path.
better path. Like you get more gains. You know what I'm saying?
You
You
get
get
if you really want to avoid the pain and the fear, the best thing to do is just deal with it head on. That's what we learn as we get older, right?
right.
Right.
And it gives you an opportunity to let go of things in some cases all at one time,
Hmm.
and in some cases one thing at a time. You know what I'm saying? And so yeah, it's interesting. You know what I'm saying? I wonder, those are two brilliant human beings, you know what I'm saying? Like I wonder what those journals, you know what I'm saying, or what those conversations were like with God, you know what I'm saying, between Pac and Nipsey. I wonder as they got closer and the things that were revealed to them and the things that manifested to them about
Right.
what was up ahead if they continued on, that either might made them say, you know what, because that's the thing too, man. You become, in some cases, a lot of us become numb to just what, like and it happens so much in movies, like I was saying, or it happens so much in music. Like dying has become glorified so much so, or murdering has become glorified so much so that, like, especially in like the black culture, it's just like if you not if you're not murdering somebody, or if you're not appearing as someone who can murder you, you're almost looked at as if you're weak,
You're weak, yeah.
or you're not a man, or you
Right.
can't possibly hold me down as a woman. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like,
Right.
and that's not the whole of
There's
the
this like
culture
false scenario that at some point you're gonna have to kill somebody
for me or
for
for
me or
you.
for
You know what I'm
you.
saying?
Yeah,
And
for
it's
our
just like,
family. It's like
man,
that's not a reality.
when you come from, and I understand right now who's dominating the media is the younger generation,
It's a
right?
self-fulfilling prophecy is what it is. Because you take on that demeanor, you end up having to live in it and
You
do
have
it.
to. You know what I'm saying?
You
Like,
bring it to yourself.
have you seen what, like, the reality of what took place this Fourth of July weekend in certain states, bro? In like Philadelphia, I think there was another Indianapolis. These
Indianapolis is
shootings,
crazy.
these shootings, bro, where it was like
Have you ever been there?
Indianapolis. No,
It's
I've
a
been to
rough that's a
Minnesota.
rough town.
I've been to Minnesota, but I haven't been to Indianapolis.
Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But I'm like, man, 44 people in a matter of hours, 44 people shot. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Damn.
yeah, bro. And then it
For
was
what?
just
Gang stuff?
gang stuff.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, bam, 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 bam. I'm
Wow.
just like,
That's
man,
war.
like
Imagine how many families. That's
that's what I'm
crazy.
saying. Hey, bro, they have it. It's like
Everybody was
circulating.
getting phone calls that day.
It's viral right now. There was this shootout at this cookout
That's a shame.
where they must have exchanged at least 100 rounds between the both of them, maybe more. Where three people died.
They were on the porch.
Yeah,
Somebody had the Glock with the switch.
yeah.
I saw that.
That was one. And then the one that happened in Indianapolis, that was in Philly. The one that happened in Indianapolis, though, there was like, he was saying, the dude was like, the officer, the chief of police.
Not trying to be funny, but did you see how that dude? Did you see how that dude with the Glock with the switch was shooting?
Yeah. But it was
That was
so,
the most amateur shit I ever seen in my life, bro.
I mean,
I'm
but
not trying to be. I'm not trying to make light of it, but
nah, I think if
that gun was.
I'm gonna ask you this, have you been in a shootout?
No. I'm sure. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And I don't think there's nearly as many bullets. Depending on where you're at and what your region was
It
10
almost
years
seems like
ago.
having that switch is not a good idea
Well, if you're in a
because you only get
situation,
1 second. It's gone.
yeah, and I think when you got that many bullets coming your way, you could just tell. Like when you hear that, it'll make you look like from the outside looking in, you don't know what you're doing. But it's
Right.
like you don't really, you can't anticipate like we're not Neo. So it's like when the bullets are coming your way, it's not until they whiz by your head that you realize like you're vulnerable to get shot. So you just, but anyway,
Okay.
I just,
I distracted it. I'm sorry.
no, it's all good, man. I just think that,
You like, man, you don't know what you're talking about. I don't. But it still was funny. He was like, I've shot a gun before.
yeah,
That was crazy. Anyway,
no, I just, I believe like, you know, we're we're fortunate, man. You know what I'm saying? We're fortunate. We've survived so much, and I believe it was a step at a time. You know what I'm saying? I think
yeah,
even though I know your story, you share it with me, but I know you know it more than anybody, bro. Like the steps you took and the steps you have to take every day to prevent yourself from going out and practicing things you practiced for years
yeah.
is um is a momentous choice and decision or decision and choice that you have to make
Do you
every.
still have to work on it every day?
Bro, I was telling somebody 3 days ago.
Because I
I
don't.
was telling you on the podcast. I
Okay, what?
said, I said, I didn't realize that when I was out there
Mm,
going against the Samoans I was going against and going against the Hispanics I was going against, and occasionally our neighboring Crip gangs, you know what I'm saying? I had no clue that I was practicing going against myself.
mm,
You know what I'm saying? I am
right.
my
I remember when
biggest
you said that.
my
Yeah.
biggest enemy
It
today.
prepared you, you said.
I may have great relationships with some Samoans now, and great relationships with some Hispanics, and even greater relationships with some of the individuals that I thought I would never have relationships with of my own skin color. You know what I'm saying? Based off of rivalries, because those they hit closer to home because we were allies and then turned enemies. So it's like, but I realized today as I'm raising children, a young black boy that's 13, my youngest one, that a lot of that practice now has made me my biggest and worst critic, my biggest and worst enemy when it comes to self sabotage, when it comes to all of the stuff I never realized I was planting seeds for,
Mm,
at being a man to this woman, you know what I'm saying? And trying to, even this situation, trying to navigate them through it
mm,
as a great leader. It's like, I got to catch a fade with myself every day.
mm.
Not to mention like just the other part that just still unfortunately I have to fight off seeing things the way that the old me tries to see things in
Sure.
the city. It's like it's a battle every day. I don't have to battle to not smoke weed. I don't have to battle to not pop pills. I don't have to battle to not drink.
Some of those things are gone.
They're out of here.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
though they're out of here.
Yeah.
It is the more I was more it's more of the violent tendencies and the thought life tendencies about being violent towards myself. Not suicide or nothing, but just verbally, like assaulting myself
I do
or
think that's a thing with you.
mm,
Like only you know your internal conversations, but
yeah,
me knowing you as well as I do think that you're violent towards yourself.
yeah.
You know, maybe that's a drastic or a
It's not.
drastic word to
It's
use.
not. I have to bandage myself up every night, man.
You're
Sometimes,
really hard on yourself,
yeah.
like more than most people I know. And ironically, because you're so great and do so much better than most people. That's my opinion. I'm entitled to it. You do so much better than most people. So for you to be as hard as you are on yourself is confusing for anybody who learns that about you.
Well, I think it's just like I remember a older cat told me in the penitentiary, "Hey man, you think too much. Every time I look at you, man, you got the wrinkles in your forehead. You walk around the yard with wrinkles in your forehead, and even when you're running, sometimes, man, you just seem like you're thinking too much." And I'm like, I think I appreciate those what people are able to identify, and they have the courage to share that with you. But I'm like, man, only if you knew how much I didn't think
Right.
before I made certain decisions.
Well, and I also get that that's part of your self development process.
Right.
You are polishing yourself still. It's the way you see it. It's like when you're in that, you know how they polish a stone and it's in the sandpaper or the rocks or whatever it is, and they just constantly go. That's what you're actually doing. I do think there will be a time where you feel like you've effectively polished yourself and you'll be easier on yourself. I still think you're just working on yourself,
And I think it's a
and it's not
craft.
easy.
I think it's
Yeah.
a skill set. I think it's something that should be considered, that something that can be professionalized. Like I don't think people give, they blanket it in therapy, or they blanket it in what's the other thing I'm thinking about? When you do yoga or when you do meditation, and all you're learning how to do in a lot of cases um is uh how am I trying to say it? Like you are perfecting your thinking, your capacity for thinking, and like controlling your thought life. You know what I'm saying? What
Analyze.
analyze, you know what I'm saying? Like your thought life. It is very much, yeah, the whole reflecting, like
Yeah.
all of that is what you do is, or action, you know what I'm saying? Is
Reflect
what the
reflection.
reflection.
It's reflection. You're taking a second to tap in with yourself and be like, how do I think? How do I feel? What's going on in my mind? Because otherwise we just keep barreling forward. Like you're taking a second to look inward. That's what
But
you're
then
saying.
also just learning your thought patterns. Like, why at this time do I always think that I don't have to work out now, I can work out later? When then later comes and I think I don't have to work out now, I will work out tomorrow. Then that turns into a week. That is not, like, procrastination would be the thing that people would say that is,
Mm-hmm.
but at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
you've just taken another word to try to communicate what initially happened, which is you you don't have control of what you're thinking and how you're thinking, or you allow your thinking to control you. And so it's like, I don't want to do that when I come home this time. I don't want my thinking to make me believe that people want to kill me and so I have to be protected, or
Mm.
I need the gang to survive, or because I'm black, I need to this or that. It's like, I don't want to be controlled by that narrative. Like, how do I understand who and how you are, Timothy? I
Right.
think that was some of the unique things about to like go back into the Pac and Nipsey thing. It's like when you look at like those moments that stood out in certain interviews, you can see like, man, there is and there never will be another person like that. Like
Right.
we, I think you and I can understand that as human beings, we all have a different fingerprint. We all have, there's only one picture on our ID. Yes, and identity wise, there will never be another one of us. But sometimes we have ways of expressing ourselves to where people can clearly see that dude is special for that. Like
Right.
there's something about him, you know what
Right.
I'm saying?
Right.
But I think being able to professionalize our thinking, like helping people think, which is what I guess life coaches do,
Right.
what motivational speakers do.
Right.
But it's never
Your voice got deep right there.
I know I burped. I burped at the same time. uh, but yeah, thinking is something that I sometimes I'm like, man, you're overthinking, but it's like I'd rather overthink than underthink.
But check,
Sometimes.
one of the biggest risks that we have is, this is one of the biggest pitfalls that we have, is confirmation bias. We have to be careful, because if we're thinking about the wrong thing, we seek it and then we look for it in the world, and then as soon as we find evidence of it, or we start perceiving things as evidence of it to confirm our pre-existing bias.
Hmm.
Like when I was running around with a certain group of people, I started to adopt the mentality that the police were out to get me.
Hmm.
I started to adopt the mentality that the police were intentionally, uh, in a concerted effort to try to kill me or put me in jail, and that I was a victim of that. And because I thought that, when I'm walking down the street with some of my friends and they pull over and start talking to me, I'm like, here they go. Harassment. When they pull my car over, and I was sitting in the back of the parking lot one time across the street from the Flying Bridge. Remember, it used to be a
Hmm.
dirt parking lot on the other side, and I was sitting in my car, and the cars started coming in, all the cop cars started coming in. All the cop cars started coming in, and next thing you know, they all set up, popped out their doors, and they all drew their guns on me. I'm just sitting in the car on the phone.
Mm.
Haven't done anything that day. I was literally just, you know, and I look at all of that as evidence that there is a concerted effort to try to kill me, us, imprison us, me unfairly. And in hindsight, I look back and I can see how not only was I aligned with a bunch of criminals, I was presenting myself as a criminal, walking, talking, and acting like a criminal. I was a criminal, and I was doing everything in my power to provoke them into a battle. A lot to be vocal about that I wanted the smoke. With specifically, I won't even say it. That shit. Glad I caught myself
Mm.
there. And I look back and I realize how much I brought onto myself. And since changing my demeanor, my friend group, my lifestyle, the police don't look at me weird ever. They don't want me in jail. They don't want to kill me. I don't get pulled over. I can't even remember the last time I got pulled over. Police drive right by me. They don't even look at me. And it's been like that for a long time. Not just because now I'm old and I got glasses on. It's been like that for a long time because I changed my life a long time ago. And they have not looked at me like that. I have not been getting pulled over or harassed or bothered. I am just like any other random ass citizen walking the streets or driving down the street. I speed and they just drive right past me. They don't even look, they don't care. Police pass me all the time on the freeway. I'm going 75, 80, and they don't give a shit. It was me. Uh, and so we have to, my point is that we have to be careful. That's just one example of confirmation bias, is that sometimes we get a thought in our heads, and then every little thing that happens that we can use as evidence that it's true, we confirm it. And then that thought gets deeper and more ingrained, and we grasp it because now we have proof.
Mhm.
We have evidence. You can't tell me anything different. And we cling on to that and we protect that. But that might be a lie that we told ourselves and then convinced ourselves of with false evidence.
Yeah.
And that is really difficult. That's how you start to get generational ignorance, disbelief, bad direction, and it becomes because you believe it so deeply that you teach it to your kids deeply from the time that they're being raised, they're young, and they believe everything that you say because you're their parent and you're the truth. And so when you believe it, then you teach it to everybody you know and the kids that you're raising, and then they grow up believing that. And guess what? Because it's a truth you planted in their head, now they're going out looking for confirmation of it. Then they see the same thing too. Oh, you know what? You're right. I see it too. And now, well, my mom told me, my dad told me, my brother, my uncle told me, and now I see it in the world. It's absolutely true. And it's not true. And you have to be careful of that. And that's really hard to know if you're even doing that because it's your reality. You have to, one thing about me that I think is, I'm grateful for is that I am wired or have learned to challenge the status quo. I don't just believe things because it's what is said. I don't just not anymore. I don't. I've always been a person to challenge the status quo, and I like to believe that I've gotten better at doing it in all areas of my life, not just in some. And I have more experience now in knowledge, so it makes it easier for me to challenge because now I have more knowledge base to say that's probably not true, or that probably is. But I still never be so sure of myself or what somebody is telling me is reality. I'm always willing to say, well, could it be this? Could it be that? And I try to confirm my thoughts with things that I believe to be true. I got to use the bathroom.
Yep.
You too?
Yep.
Let's roll it.
Hey, this has been randomly intentional. I'm
I've
Timothy
been
on
doing the pee
purpose.
dance in this chair for 30 minutes. I'm Raine.
And yeah, man, we'll catch y'all on the next one. Be blessed, stay safe, man. And yeah, hey, like, comment, subscribe. If there's anything that y'all would like to see, even though this is very randomly intentional every morning, we just try to bring our conversation to y'all in a documented way.
Yeah.
But if there are some things that you know you might like to see us or hear us talk about, Drop it in the chat,
Yeah.
or something that we may have been talking about that you agree or disagree. Drop it in the chat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. How do you feel about the things that we're talking about? Because we don't always agree. So I'm sure somebody's got some thoughts on it.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
in the meantime, in the between time, man, stay safe, stay focused.
Enjoy the rest of your week.
Peace.
Woo! Love you, brother.
You too, man.